$1.75 billion raised before a single customer had watched a single video. Disney invested, NBC Universal invested, Sony, Warner Media, Alibaba, all of them believed the founder had made The Lion King, Shrek, and Kung Fu Panda. The CEO had run eBay and Hewlett-Packard. Steven Spielberg was making content for them. Jennifer Lopez, Kevin Hart, LeBron James. The smartest money in Hollywood was all pointing in the same direction. And 6 months after launch, Quibi announced it was shutting down. $1.75 billion, 6 months, gone. Not the biggest financial loss in tech history, but perhaps the fastest collapse of a fully funded, celebrity-endorsed, industry-backed startup the world has ever seen. And the reason it failed is not the one most people think. Behind the empire, the story of Quibi, the fastest billion-dollar failure. To understand Quibi, you first have to understand the man who built it. Jeffrey Katzenberg is one of the most successful executives in the history of Hollywood. Not moderately successful. Legendarily successful, he arrived at Disney in 1984 and ran the studio for a decade. Under his watch, Disney produced The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Lion King, the greatest run of animated film success in the company's history. When he left Disney in 1994, under difficult circumstances, he did not slow down. He co-founded DreamWorks with Steven Spielberg and music executive David Geffen. And from DreamWorks, he produced Shrek, Madagascar, Kung Fu Panda, How to Train Your Dragon, franchise after franchise. Billion-dollar properties that defined entire generations of animated entertainment. Jeffrey Katzenberg did not build one empire, he built three. By the time he left DreamWorks in 2016, he had spent over 30 years being one of the most consistently successful people in an industry where failure is the norm. And he believed, with the certainty of someone who had almost never been wrong about entertainment, that he understood something the rest of the industry was missing. People were watching videos on their phones during moments of downtime, on the subway, in line at the coffee shop, during lunch breaks, on airport tarmacs, millions of small windows of time throughout the day. And nobody had built premium, cinematic quality, professionally produced content designed specifically for that context. YouTube was low-budget user content. Netflix was long-form for the living room couch. TikTok was 15-second clips with no production value. What if you built something in the middle? Episodes of 7 to 10 minutes, Hollywood-grade production, stories structured for the commute, content you could consume in the spare moments of your day. Katzenberg called it Quibi, quick bites, and he believed it would change the way an entire generation consumed entertainment. He hired Meg Whitman to run it. Whitman had grown eBay from a tiny startup to a global marketplace, had led Hewlett-Packard through a massive restructuring, a serious operational executive with a track record of scaling things that needed scaling. Together, Katzenberg and Whitman were as credentialed a founding duo as any startup had ever produced. The pitch meetings must have been extraordinary, because the money came in extraordinary amounts. $1 billion in their first funding round, another $750 million before launch, $1.75 billion total from Disney, from NBC Universal, from Sony, from Warner Media, from Alibaba, from Goldman Sachs, companies that represented the entire architecture of the global entertainment industry, betting on two veterans who had spent decades winning. The content roster was equally extraordinary. Steven Spielberg was making a horror series for them. Kevin Hart, Jennifer Lopez, Idris Elba, Anna Kendrick, Sophie Turner, LeBron James, Chrissy Teigen. The advertising was sold out before the product launched. $150 million in ad commitments from Google, Pepsi, and Procter & Gamble for a service that had never had a single subscriber. That is the power of Katzenberg's name. That is the kind of confidence 2 decades of unbroken success can buy. On April 6, 2020, Quibi launched. And the world was completely, catastrophically different from the one Quibi had been designed for. 3 weeks earlier, the World Health Organization had declared COVID-19 a global pandemic. Countries were going into lockdown. Offices were closing. Schools were closing. Restaurants were closing. The daily routines that structured modern life, the commutes, the coffee shop queues, the airport waits, the lunch hours, had evaporated almost overnight. The commuter who was supposed to be Quibi's primary customer was sitting in their living room in front of a television. Subscribe to Netflix, subscribe to Disney+, subscribe to Hulu, watching content for free on YouTube. And now Quibi wanted them to pay $4.99 a month for 7-minute episodes on their phone. Katzenberg immediately blamed the pandemic. He told the New York Times in May 2020 that he attributed everything that has gone wrong to coronavirus. It was a line that felt instinctively true in the moment, but it was also wrong, or at least incomplete, because the pandemic made everything worse, but it did not create the problems. It revealed them. The problems were baked into the product before the pandemic arrived. The first was fundamental. Quibi was mobile only. You could only watch on your phone. Not on your laptop, not on your tablet, not on your television, just your phone. In 2020, with the entire world sitting at home surrounded by larger screens, this was not a quirky product limitation. It was a reason not to subscribe. Quibi's team understood this within weeks of launch. They scrambled to add AirPlay and Chromecast support. Launched apps for Apple TV, Android TV, and Fire TV, but the fixes came months after launch. Months during which the free trial period was converting almost nobody into paying subscribers. The second problem was equally fundamental. Quibi could not be shared. Users could not take screenshots of the content, could not clip moments from shows and post them to social media, could not create the word-of-mouth viral loops that had built Netflix, that had built Disney+, that had built every streaming service that succeeded. In 2020, a streaming platform without shareability was a party with no invitations. How does anyone know to show up? How does a show become something people talk about if no one can share the moment that made them laugh or cry or gasp? Katzenberg came from a world where word of mouth meant movie reviews in newspapers and advertisements on television. He did not come from a world where the audience was also the distribution network. And in 2020, without the audience doing distribution, you were invisible. Quibi scrambled to allow screenshots months later, but even then, they created their own proprietary sharing system instead of simply allowing native screenshots. A company fixing the wrong thing in the wrong way, at the wrong time. The third problem was the content itself. Not that it was bad, some of it was genuinely well-produced. A show called #FreeRaySean even won Emmy Awards in the short-form category. The problem was that none of it was essential. None of it was the thing people could not stop talking about. None of it was the show that made someone grab their phone and text 3 friends immediately. Katzenberg had recruited the biggest names in Hollywood to make content, but big names do not guarantee cultural moments. And without a cultural moment, without the Squid Game, the Tiger King, the White Lotus, a streaming service is just content nobody has found a reason to watch. The fourth and deepest problem was the premise itself. Quibi was built on the assumption that people wanted premium, paid, short-form content during their downtime moments. But what do people actually do during their commute? They scroll social media, they read the news, they listen to podcasts, they text friends, they stare out the window. They do not typically open a subscription service and start paying to watch professionally produced 7-minute episodes. Short-form video was already being served by YouTube for free, and by TikTok for free, and by Instagram Reels for free. The competition for those commuter minutes was not Netflix. It was not other streaming services. It was every free platform that had already colonized the phone. Quibi was asking people to pay for something they were already getting at no cost. Not better, not different in kind, just more expensive and shinier. The numbers were unmistakable and arrived fast. In the first 3 days after launch, Quibi got 1.7 million downloads. An impressive number. A 90-day free trial meant those downloaders had almost 3 months to decide if they were willing to pay. When the free trials started converting to paid subscriptions, the results were quietly catastrophic. Analytics firm Sensor Tower estimated that only around 72,000 of the people who signed up in the first 3 days converted to paying subscribers after the trial ended, a conversion rate of approximately 8%. For context, the investor pitch had projected 7 million subscribers in year 1 and 20 million subscribers within 5 years. What they had in reality was an audience you could fit inside a mid-sized basketball arena. Quibi disputed the specific numbers publicly, but they also never released their actual paid subscriber figures, which told you everything you needed to know. In June 2020, Katzenberg tried to sell the company. He reportedly approached Apple. He reportedly approached Facebook. He reportedly approached Warner Media. None of them wanted it at a price that made the numbers work. By September, the path to survival had essentially closed. Katzenberg called investors. He told them he was shutting down. On October 22, 2020, Quibi announced it would be closing, 6 months and 16 days after it launched. $1.75 billion raised. Approximately $350 million returned to investors. The rest of the money, gone. spent on content, on technology, on marketing, on salaries and infrastructure for a product that found no real audience. Quibi was dead. In the aftermath, Katzenberg said something that was both gracious and honest. He and Meg Whitman wrote an open letter to their employees. In it, they said, Quibi is not succeeding, likely for one of two reasons. Because the idea itself wasn't strong enough to justify a standalone streaming service, or because of our timing. It was a rarer kind of admission than most failed founders make. The acknowledgement that the idea itself might have been wrong. Not just the execution, not just the timing, the idea, but even that admission may have been too kind to themselves. Because the most honest diagnosis of Quibi is not that the pandemic ruined it, or that the timing was unlucky. It is that the product was built for an audience that did not exist. Not because short-form video does not have an audience. TikTok would reach 1 billion monthly users the following year. Short-form video was the fastest-growing content format in the world. The audience was real. But the Quibi version of short-form video, paid, exclusive, non-shareable, mobile-only, professionally produced, was a format nobody had asked for. TikTok was free. YouTube was free. Instagram Reels was free. The entire short-form video ecosystem that young audiences lived inside was free. Quibi was asking a generation that had grown up with infinite free content to pay $5 a month for something they would have to watch alone on their phone without being able to share it, without being able to discuss it, without the social fabric that makes content meaningful. And this is what no amount of money could fix. No amount of Hollywood talent could fix. No amount of premium production value could fix. The product did not solve a problem that real people were having. It solved a problem that two incredibly accomplished executives imagined real people were having. From the comfort of boardrooms and investor presentations and pitch meetings where everyone in the room wanted it to be true, there is a specific kind of trap that expertise creates. When you have succeeded at something for long enough, your past success starts to look like evidence about the future. Katzenberg had been right about entertainment for 40 years. He had sensed what audiences wanted before they knew they wanted it. He had built animated franchises when nobody believed adults would watch animated films. He had co-founded a studio that competed with the biggest names in Hollywood and won. So when he had an instinct about what mobile audiences wanted, that instinct carried the weight of an extraordinary track record, and everyone around him responded to that weight. Investors wrote the checks because of who he was. Content creators signed on because of who he was. Advertisers committed because of who he was. Nobody demanded the proof that the audience actually existed, because surely Jeffrey Katzenberg knew what audiences wanted. He always had, until he didn't, and the lesson that sits at the center of the Quibi story is one that applies to every person who has ever built something and succeeded. Past success is evidence about the past. It is not evidence about the future. Markets change, audiences change. The way people relate to technology and content and community changes. And the moment you stop testing your assumptions against reality, the moment you trust your track record more than the feedback in front of you, you are building for a world that may no longer exist. Quibi had $1.75 billion. It had the best names in entertainment, and it had the credibility of decades of proven achievement. What it did not have was a user who actually needed what it was building. And in business, that is the only thing that matters. All the money in the world cannot create desire, and all the talent in the world cannot manufacture belonging. Quibi spent $1.75 billion trying to prove otherwise, and the market gave its answer in 6 months. Thank you for watching Behind the Empire. If you found this story valuable, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who would enjoy it. Comment below with the next company you want us to break down, and follow us for more stories on how billion-dollar empires are built and destroyed.